All right, before we get too far into what's in the vise today, let's take a quick look at some new dubbing here from Spawn Fly Fish. This is called the Unreal dub, and it's called Unreal. Two reasons: one, because it is a synthetic dubbing, and two, because of the way it puts fish in the net, just unreal. And this is the October Caddis coloration, and if you ordered during our sale this week at all, you should have received a package of this, a sample with your goodies. And so today we're going to talk about what to do with this dubbing. So we're going to tie a little Caddis Pupa. And in the vise, I've got the Ahrex FW541. This is a size 8. And for the bead, I'm rocking the 5/32 Plummeting Tungsten bead, and this is metallic brown. So let's get some wire on here just to hold that bead in place. And today I've got some lead-free 0.020 that I'm using. We'll get about 8 wraps on there. Go ahead and trim that out in the front, like so. And we're just gonna round over that cut edge with the inside of our dedicated wire cutting scissor. There we go. And now we will cut back and do the same thing. Just round over that cut edge. Nothing to it. There we go. Slip that wire right into the back side of that bead in that cavity and should be good to go. Now, a lot of you are going to see this and go, man, that's big for a nymph, size 8. I get it. However, I do want to be able to see as far as like what you guys are seeing here on the camera. So a little bit big. If it were me and I'm fishing this, I'd probably drop down to a size 10, but by all means I will throw this size 8, especially this time of year. A lot of big cutthroat in the system before they all move out when those chum salmon really move in. So for the thread, just some 6/0 black, 140, whatever you want to use, whatever you got handy, great. Brown would be great. So all I'm going to do is work my thread back here now and create a visual cue for myself so I know where to stop. I'm going to utilize a good portion of this shank here. So that's about it for that. So let's get into some materials here. I've got some vinyl rib, and I'll show you here. This is size Midge in the color brown, and that's going to be our rib today. And when you look at a piece of vinyl rib, you'll see that there's a flat side and then of course the V side. We want to tie that V side down against the shank, and the reason being, when we start to wrap this as our rib, then that V will be on the outer side of our materials, and that's the side we want to see. We don't want to see that flat portion. We want to see the V side. So there's our V rib tied in. And now we're going to give this fly a little bit of a dorsal quality. So it's darker on top, looks more like a natural bug that's trying to get out and all that good stuff. So I've just got some pheasant tail and brown. And I'm going to cut a big healthy chunk of that off the quill. I'm looking for, roughly 1/4 of an inch wide on that piece of pheasant tail. And just want to kind of tie this in on top, loose couple of wraps to start, and then I'm going to guide with my fingers as I progress downward on the shank and keep all this goodness on the top. So when we bring it over on top of our other materials, it is on the top. There we go. And so as you can see, when I bring this over, it'll stay on top of that hook. That's what we want. As far as how well it stays on top, well, we're going to have to finagle that a little as we wrap it. So let me just trim out the little tag ends of these pheasant tail fibers and we can get to business here. All right, at this point, we're just going to dub the body. So we have our dorsal and our rib tied in. So let's get to some of this Unreal October Caddis dub. I will tell you, with synthetic dubbing like this, if you're into noodles, and that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to use a dubbing noodle. this is the type of dubbing where by all means, I don't, even if you've been doing this forever, like I'm not a big fan of wax when I'm putting dubbing on a thread, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be. And this is a great time to utilize some wax. This stuff is real slick, right? Doesn't have that natural fiber in there that sometimes tends to grab onto the thread a little bit easier for you. So you're gonna have to use, just a little bit of wax, and that's it. Nothing crazy. It's not gonna change too much for you. So by all means, don't be shy. Just get in there, get a little wax on that thread, and it'll make dubbing this noodle a little bit easier. All right, so now let's start wrapping this back. One thing we want to keep in mind with these Caddis Pupas, especially the October, is just how beefy and chunky and chubby they really are. They're not a subtle small bug, definitely not fishing a midge or anything like that. This is a big chunky body, so we're gonna add plenty of dub and make sure that we do this fly justice, because these fish at this point, they're looking for a meal. They're not looking for that little tiny snack, right? This is the time of year that these cutthroat are getting in all that goodness from the salmon species that are coming into the river to spawn. And so of course they're grabbing eggs and little bits of flesh here and there, but they're not going to say no thanks to a big old caddis pupa. So there we go. Substantial body. That's what we're looking for. So now let's bring these pheasant tail fibers over the top. Like so. I just want to get a couple of loose wraps here, and then I can start getting a little bit picky. Like there's a fiber here that I just don't care for. And so by all means, I'll undo that out of the thread and just trim it. Nothing crazy, right? And so at this point, you can see all those fibers are covering that dorsal side, and that's what we want. Now, if you look closely, these fibers are a little bit toward my side and a little bit shy of your side. Why? Because as I wrap this rib now, let me get that first wrap. I'm going to go for, roughly 5 wraps is what I'm shooting for. If you watch closely, as I bring this over, it's going to kind of start to bring some of those fibers toward you. And so my job now at this point is to make sure it doesn't go crazy and really yank them off center and bring it off the top of that fly. So keep that in mind. And it's not something you'll get the first time you tie it. It might take you a few. So be patient. It's okay. So at this point, you see where that V-rib wants to get right in there, right underneath the bead. We're not going to let it get that far. We do want to leave a little space there because we have some other elements to add. And so get that tied in and secured. Looking pretty buggy already. Trim out that V-rib. And now let's trim out all those butt ends of the pheasant tail. Little housekeeping here. Trim up anything that doesn't need to be in the way. And this bug does not have to be, super polished, like all these little frizzy bits of fiber coming out. Great. Let it look scruffy. Let it look buggy. That's what this deal is. All right, so as far as our thoracic section, we're gonna get into some Midge Cactus Chenille. And this is something we just recently brought in here at Spawn. And we brought in all the colors. Amazing product, and I will show you why I'm a fan right now. So I'm just gonna start that. But do you see as I wrap back, I'm creating space here now, really defining that thoracic area. And you'll see why here as we keep going. So there's our chenille tied in for that thorax. And now let's talk about our collar. Our collar is going to consist of 2 different feathers. We've got CDC and CDL. So with the CDC or col de canard, I've got some Fullin mill cinnamon CDC. And as you see, these fibers that are coming off this quill are much a little bit longer than the body of this fly, which is perfect. And then when we look at the CDL or Coq de Leon, you can see they're just going to go past the end of that body. So these are my feathers that I want to work with. Now, instead of tying these in separately, wrapping one and then the other, or whatever, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a fun challenge, or at least I think it's a fun challenge. So I've got these stacked on top of each other, the tips trimmed out. And I'm going to tie these in so that they're going over the bead or hook eye, right? So get a couple grabs here with some loose wraps. And at this point, just make sure everybody's going to play nicely. So the way you tie these in is with the good portion down and the inside or concave portion looking up. And then when you bring it back and start to wrap, the good side or that convex side will be facing outward, and it'll look as pretty as it can for the fish. And that's kind of what we want. All right. Make sure you don't have any real big fibers coming out right there. Otherwise, it'll just be a little distracting when you're trying to wrap those feathers. It's not terribly difficult, but it is something you might not be used to just yet. So give yourself as much advantage as you can. All right, so let's wrap this thorax. And again, this is that Midge-sized cactus chenille in Peacock. So absolutely, you could use natural Peacock here. Advantage to using this chenille, well, I don't have to cut any fibers off of the quill. You don't need that. I don't have to worry about consistency. Every time I use this, it's going to be the same, and there's some comfort in knowing that. So let's trim out our cactus chenille. One more wrap to make sure everything is solidified. And now we're going to wrap these feathers. And for the most part here, all I'm looking for is one full wrap, because we have 2 feathers. So I don't need 4 or 5 wraps of anything, right? Just one. There it is. Get that V, let that thread fly right through there and solidify. There we go. Let me get in front there a little bit, and let's trim these butts out, and you will see what happens with this technique. There's our CDC and CDL. And now, if we get our comb out and just kind of release some of these fibers a little, you will see just how big and flowy this bug's going to look. And that is exactly what we are going for. We want a big meal, right? You're not going to tempt these guys with a little snack right now. They want the whole enchilada. There we go. Time for that whip finish. And of course, we're going to use 2. There's our first one. See that pesky little bit of CDL right there, or CDC, excuse me. And now let's do our second one. Take your time, really make those thread wraps count, and make sure all those fibers are out of the way. Don't want to cut any fibers I don't need to. There's one that's just going to get cut no matter what. There we go. And I can release those bottom fibers now that got wrapped around that hook point. And that's pretty buggy, folks. So you've got that dark dorsal side. You've got that beautiful orange coloration from the October Caddis Unreal dub. And now let's solidify all of our hard work with some Loon hardhead. And this is Loon hardhead clear. Any cement that you have will work just fine. And I would say, you know, as far as like tying this in different colors, by all means, you should have it in olive, maybe a tan, or even cream. But for this time of year, this is what we're going for. And the CDL, the Coq de Leon that I used, is whiting, and it is speckled shrimp orange or mottled shrimp orange. And there we go, folks. There is an October Caddis Pupa, and it is ready to smack some monster cutthroat. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember, hit like, hit subscribe, and we will see you guys on the water.